Admiral Torren stood on the command deck of the Imperial flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His six-fingered hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the viewscreen. The small blue planet rotated slowly, seeming almost peaceful against the blackness of space. Primitive, yet interesting, he muttered to himself. Captain Davik approached with a data tablet. Admiral, our scans confirm what intelligence reported. The species calls themselves humans. They've achieved spaceflight, but have barely colonized their own moon and neighboring planet. Their technology is at least 3 centuries behind ours. Torren nodded, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light from the screen. The Empire had conquered over 200 planetary systems in its 1,000-year expansion. Each new species followed the same pattern: initial resistance, then quick surrender once they understood the might of Imperial technology. Open a channel to their global leadership, Torren ordered. The communications officer worked the controls. Channel open, Admiral. Torren straightened his uniform and assumed the formal posture of Imperial diplomacy. Attention, leaders of Earth. I am Admiral Torren of the Galactic Imperial Fleet. Your world has been charted and claimed by the Empire. We require your unconditional surrender and resource rights to your planet. Resistance will result in standard subjugation protocols. You have 1 planetary rotation to respond. The communication ended, and Torren turned to his war council. Prepare the first wave of landing craft. I want forward bases established on their northern continent within 3 days. General Kelv, the fleet's tactical officer, reviewed the human defense capabilities on his screen. Their weapons are primitive, Admiral. Mostly chemical propellants and basic nuclear warheads. Nothing that can penetrate our shields. As expected, Torren replied. Another easy conquest for the Empire. 12 hours later, the bridge communications officer interrupted Torren's meal. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Torren wiped his mouth. Display it. The view screen showed a single human in a simple dark uniform. No decorations, no visible rank insignia. The human's face showed no fear, which surprised Torren. Usually, primitive species displayed terror when facing Imperial might. This is Commander Thomas of Earth Defense, the human said calmly. We have received your demand. We have a simple response. We advise you to reconsider. For your own safety, turn back now. Torren couldn't help but laugh. The other officers on the bridge joined in. Is that all? Torren asked, still chuckling. The human's expression remained serious. We have studied your approach pattern and scanned your ships. We understand your intentions. This is not a plea, Admiral. It is a warning. Humans are not like other species you have encountered. Bold words from a planet with no proper defense grid. Torren responded. Your bravery is noted, but meaningless. Prepare for Imperial occupation. Commander Thomas sighed. Very well. We will mark our official records to show that we warned you. The transmission ended. Torren turned to his officers. Begin standard subjugation protocol. Deploy scout ships and establish a forward command post near their largest population center. As the orders went out, Lieutenant Mira, the youngest officer on the bridge, approached Torren. Admiral, don't you find their response unusual? No begging, no offers of tribute, not even anger. Torren dismissed her concern with a wave. Psychological tactics. They hope to unsettle us. I've seen similar approaches before. Outside the flagship, 20 smaller Imperial vessels broke formation and headed toward Earth. The conquest had begun. On Earth, Commander Thomas watched the approaching ships on his monitor. He pressed a button on his desk. They've made their choice, he said to someone off-screen. Activate Protocol Omega. Inform all defense units. The Empire didn't heed our warning. Now they'll learn why they should have. The Imperial scout ship, Swift Seeker, entered Earth's atmosphere without incident. Captain Lorix watched the clouds part as they descended toward the landing coordinates. His mission was simple: establish Outpost Alpha, the first Imperial presence on this new world. "Status report," he commanded. "All systems normal, Captain," his navigator replied. "No sign of human defensive measures. They appear to be letting us land without resistance." Lorix frowned. This wasn't the usual pattern. Most species at least attempted to shoot down the first Imperial ships, even if their weapons were useless against Imperial shields. "Maintain alert status. This feels wrong." The scout ship landed in a clearing 30 miles from a human city called Denver. Teams quickly deployed, setting up the prefabricated structures of Outpost Alpha. By nightfall, the base was operational with 40 Imperial personnel and standard defense systems. "Perimeter secured," Captain, reported Security Chief Nex. "No human contact yet, but our sensors detect observation drones at the edge of our scanning range." "Let them watch," Lorix said. "They'll learn who their new masters are soon enough." That night, Captain Lorix sent his first status report to the fleet. "Outpost Alpha established. No resistance encountered. Beginning resource survey tomorrow." Admiral Toran received the report with satisfaction. "The humans are wiser than they appeared. Perhaps they recognize the futility of resistance." 3 days later, Outpost Alpha went silent. Admiral Toran was in his quarters when the alert came. "What do you mean, no contact?" he demanded. Communications Officer Julk looked nervous. "The outpost's scheduled report never arrived. We've tried all channels. No response." "Send a surveillance drone," Toran ordered. 6 hours later, the drone's footage appeared on the bridge's main screen. Where Outpost Alpha had stood was now just empty land. No buildings, no equipment, no signs of battle. Nothing. "Impossible," General Kelv whispered. "There would be debris, signs of attack." "Where are our people?" Toran demanded. No one had an answer. The Empire established 2 more outposts, Beta and Gamma, in different locations. Each was more heavily defended than Alpha. Each went silent within days. Commander Vilox, the Empire's top investigator, was dispatched to discover what happened. His team approached the site of Outpost Beta with weapons ready, expecting an ambush. What they found was more disturbing. Like Alpha, the outpost was simply gone. But Vilox's team discovered something new. Tiny marks in the soil, perfectly straight lines forming a grid pattern over the entire area. "It's like someone took the outpost apart piece by piece," Vilox said, examining the marks. With surgical precision. A junior officer called from nearby. "Commander, I found something." The officer pointed to a small object stuck in the ground. An Imperial communication badge. Next to it, written in the soil in perfect Imperial script, was a message. "Last Woe Arnang." When Vilox returned to the fleet, Admiral Toran called an emergency war council. 3 outposts, 40 personnel each, vanished without a trace. Toran summarized. No bodies, no wreckage, no distress signals. General Kelv studied the reports. "The humans must have some kind of stealth technology we haven't encountered before, but our scans showed nothing that advanced." Lieutenant Mira spoke up. "What if we're underestimating them? What if their warning was genuine?" The room fell silent. Then Admiral Toran slammed his fist on the table. "Nonsense. We are the Imperial fleet. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. This is merely a clever tactic to delay the inevitable." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the main assault fleet. We will skip the gradual approach and move directly to full invasion protocol." As the officers filed out, Vilox remained behind. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I've reviewed the historical records of every conquest in Imperial history. No species has ever been able to remove our outposts without leaving evidence of how they did it." Toran's eyes narrowed. "Your point, Commander." "Just this. The humans aren't fighting the way we expect. Perhaps we should consider." "I don't want to hear it," Toran interrupted. "The invasion begins tomorrow. In orbit around Earth, the humans watched the Imperial fleet prepare for assault." Commander Thomas studied the enemy formation on his screen. They didn't listen, he said. Activate Phase 2. The Imperial invasion fleet filled Earth's orbit like a swarm of metal insects. 500 warships, each carrying thousands of troops, prepared to launch the largest first-wave assault in Imperial history. Admiral Torren stood proud on the bridge of the Eternal Dominance. Begin the attack. Show these humans the true might of the Empire. The massive ships moved into position, weapon systems powering up. On the tactical display, Earth looked small and defenseless. Weapons locked on primary targets, reported the weapons officer. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. Fire. Torren commanded again. The weapons officer frantically worked his console. Systems not responding. Admiral. Weapons control is locked. Before Torren could respond, the ship's lights flickered. The main view screen changed, displaying a human face. Commander Thomas. I told you to turn back, Thomas said calmly. You should have listened. Torren's face darkened with rage. How are you doing this? Our systems are impenetrable. Not impenetrable, just unfamiliar to us, until recently. Thomas glanced down, seeming to read something. Right now, 372 of your ships are experiencing similar issues. The others will follow shortly. Around the bridge, officers reported mounting problems. Navigation systems failing. Engines shutting down. Internal communications going silent. This is impossible, General Kelv shouted. Our technology is centuries beyond theirs. The human on screen shook his head. Technology isn't everything, General. While your scout ships were landing, we were learning. Your systems have exploitable weaknesses. We found them. Suddenly, the ship's communication array activated on its own, broadcasting the fleet's exact position and tactical information to every human defense station on Earth. Lieutenant Mira stared at her console in disbelief. Admiral, they're not attacking our ships. They're taking control of them. On Earth, Lieutenant Reed stood before a room of human soldiers at Defense Command Headquarters. The wall screens showed Imperial ships hanging motionless in orbit. The Empire expected conventional warfare, Reed explained. They thought we would throw missiles and fighters at them, weapons they could easily defeat with their superior technology. He pulled up a diagram of an Imperial warship. Instead, we used their own systems against them. Their ships communicate on quantum channels they believed we couldn't access. But 6 months ago, when we detected their scout probes at the edge of our system, our cyber teams began working. Reed pointed to specific sections of the ship diagram. Their systems are advanced but designed for efficiency, not security. They never needed security because no species they encountered could breach their technology. Until now. A soldier raised her hand. Sir, why not just destroy their ships if we have this level of control? Because we don't want to destroy them, Reed answered. We want them to leave. Destruction is their way, not ours. Besides, we can learn more from intact ships. In orbit, Admiral Torren tried desperately to regain control of his fleet. One by one, ships were breaking formation, their systems compromised. Admiral, Captain Davik reported, the humans have deployed small craft. They're attaching devices to our hulls. On the view screen, Thomas spoke again. Those devices will help us maintain control of your systems. I suggest you order an immediate retreat while you still command enough ships to do so. Torren slammed his fist down. Never. The Empire does not retreat. Then watch, Thomas said simply. 20 Imperial ships suddenly fired their engines, breaking formation. They moved into a new position, forming a perfect Earth symbol visible from the planet below. An arrow pointing away from Earth. On his command ship, Torren received reports of more systems failing. Life support was beginning to fluctuate. Admiral, Lieutenant Mira said quietly, I think we should consider withdrawal. The humans aren't fighting the way we expected. We need to regroup and develop a new strategy. Torren looked around his bridge. His officers, the pride of the Imperial fleet, appeared confused and frightened. This had never happened before. "Signal the fleet," he finally ordered. "Tactical withdrawal to Sector 9. We will regroup and return with a new approach." As the Imperial ships limped away, Commander Thomas sent one final message. "We'll be waiting. And next time, we won't be so gentle." The Imperial War Council chamber buzzed with angry voices. Holograms of fleet commanders from across the Empire filled the room, all demanding explanations. Admiral Torrens stood in the center, his proud posture now stiff with tension. "Silence." Emperor Vex's voice cut through the noise. Though present only as a hologram, his authority was absolute. The room fell quiet immediately. "Admiral Torran," the Emperor said coldly, "explain how a primitive species forced my finest fleet into retreat." Torrens swallowed hard. "The humans possess unexpected capabilities, Your Majesty. They somehow infiltrated our ship systems and—" "Impossible," General Axis interrupted. "Our security protocols are unbreachable." Commander Villox stepped forward, data tablet in hand. "With respect, General, the evidence shows otherwise. Analysis of the ships that returned indicates a sophisticated cyber attack unlike anything in our records." He projected images showing the small devices humans had attached to Imperial ships. "These appear simple, but contain technology that interfaces with our systems in ways we don't fully understand." Emperor Vex leaned forward, his 6 eyes narrowing. "How did a species that has barely left their planet develop such technology?" The room fell silent again. No one had an answer. "They adapt quickly," Lieutenant Mira finally said. All eyes turned to her. Despite her junior rank, she had been invited to the council after predicting several human tactics correctly. "Our intelligence shows they've gone from primitive flight to space exploration in less than 2 centuries. Their technological development isn't linear like most species. It's exponential." General Axis scoffed. "Regardless of how clever they are, our military might is unmatched. We should return with overwhelming force and crush them completely." "We tried force," Admiral Torran reminded him. "They countered without firing a single conventional weapon." Tactical displays showed the battle data. Imperial ships rendered useless. Human drones that could slip through shields as if they weren't there. Communication systems hijacked with ease. "There's something else," Commander Villox added. "The recovered data from our scout ships indicates the humans have been studying us since our first probes entered their system 6 months ago. They weren't surprised by our arrival." The Emperor's hologram paced. "What do you propose, Admiral?" Torran hesitated. "A new approach, Your Majesty. Instead of conventional warfare, we deploy our planet-killer weapons from a safe distance. The humans can't counter what they can't reach." "Orbital bombardment." General Axis nodded approvingly. "Destroy their major cities. Break their spirit." Lieutenant Mira looked troubled. "Sir, if I may, the humans let our ships go. They could have destroyed the fleet but chose not to. Perhaps we should consider diplomatic." "Enough," the Emperor thundered. "We do not negotiate with primitives. The Empire has never retreated permanently from any world. This will not be the first." He turned to General Axis. "You will lead the next assault. Use our long-range planet killers. Target their largest cities. Show them what happens when they defy the Empire." General Axis bowed. "With pleasure, Your Majesty." As the council dispersed, Lieutenant Mira approached Commander Villox in the corridor. "This is a mistake," she said quietly. "The humans warned us to run. What if they were trying to prevent something worse?" Villox glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I've studied over 100 species' first contact records. None have ever shown the capabilities these humans possess. It's almost as if—" He paused. "As if what?" Mira pressed. "As if they'd been preparing for this, not just since our probes arrived, but for much longer." Back on Earth, human defense teams studied the captured Imperial technology. Engineers worked tirelessly to integrate the alien systems with their own. In a secured underground facility, Commander Thomas met with the Global Defense Council. "The Empire will return," he said, pointing to long-range scans. "Our intel suggests they're preparing for orbital bombardment." An older woman, Director Parker, nodded gravely. "Then it's time to activate the Aegis Protocol." Thomas looked surprised. "Those systems haven't been tested in actual combat." "We've been building them for 50 years, Parker replied. "Since we detected the first alien signals and realized what was out there. The Empire just gave us the final pieces we needed." She pressed her palm to a scanner, and a massive wall display activated, showing hundreds of orbital platforms hidden throughout the solar system. "When the Empire returns," she said, "they'll discover that humans don't just adapt. We plan ahead." General Axis stood on the command deck of the Imperial Dreadnought Inevitable Conquest, the largest warship ever built by the Empire. Behind him, a fleet of 300 specialized bombardment vessels moved into position. "Status report," he demanded. "All ships in position, General," his second-in-command replied. "Target locks confirmed on all major human population centers. Weapons charged at maximum capacity." The general smiled. Unlike Torrens' failed approach, his strategy was foolproof. The bombardment ships would remain well outside the range where humans had hijacked the previous fleet's systems. From this safe distance, they would rain destruction on Earth until the humans surrendered or perished. "Begin countdown," Axis ordered. "Fire on my command." The command deck hummed with activity as the fleet prepared to launch the devastating attack. On the main view screen, Earth spun peacefully, unaware of its impending doom. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. Fire." Brilliant beams of energy erupted from the Imperial ships, streaking toward Earth. General Axis watched with satisfaction. No primitive species could withstand this level of assault. Suddenly, the tactical officer shouted, "Energy signature detected." Multiple objects emerging from hidden positions around the planet. The view screen showed hundreds of small platforms emerging from concealment, activating in sequence around Earth. As the Imperial weapons fire approached, the platforms generated a shimmering energy field that enveloped the entire planet. When the Imperial bombardment struck the field, the energy didn't penetrate. Instead, it was absorbed, causing the shield to glow brighter. "Impossible," Axis whispered. Even more alarming, the platforms began redirecting the absorbed energy, sending it back toward the Imperial fleet in precise, concentrated beams. 3 bombardment ships exploded before they could raise their shields. "Evasive maneuvers," Axis shouted. "All ships, retreat to safe distance." As the Imperial fleet scattered, a transmission cut through their communication channels. Commander Thomas appeared on screen, but something was different. His eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light. "You should have heeded our warning, General," Thomas said, his voice oddly resonant. "Your attack on New Denver has triggered what we call the awakening." "What are you talking about?" Axis demanded. "Our weapons never reached your planet." "Not today," Thomas replied. "But in the future you are going to create. We've seen it." Before Axis could respond, sensors detected new energy signatures throughout the solar system. Hidden installations on Mars, Venus, and Jupiter's moons activated simultaneously. Dozens of previously undetected human ships emerged from behind Earth's moon, their design unlike anything the Empire had encountered, sleeker, more advanced than even Imperial vessels. "This is impossible," Axis tactical officer stammered. "Our scans show they had no significant space fleet." Thomas continued, "For generations, we've prepared for this moment. The attack you just attempted triggered emergency protocols, systems we built after we first detected signals from your empire a century ago. The human ships moved with impossible speed, surrounding the Imperial fleet. They didn't fire weapons, but instead deployed small devices similar to those used in the previous encounter. Faster than light interdiction field activating, reported a panicked officer. Our jump drives are being suppressed." General Axis watched in horror as more human ships appeared, cutting off any escape route. His supposedly invincible fleet was now trapped. "You have one chance, General," Thomas said, the glow in his eyes intensifying. "Surrender your fleet and return to your Emperor with a message. Earth is off limits. The Empire does not surrender." Axis shouted, though his voice lacked conviction. Thomas sighed. "Then witness what you've awakened." The orbital platforms redirected their energy toward a point in space, creating what appeared to be a tear in reality itself. From this rift emerged a massive human vessel, dwarfing even the inevitable conquest. "This is the HSS Retribution," Thomas explained, "the first of our true warships. We built it using knowledge from timelines where your empire destroyed our world. We hoped never to need it." On his command deck, General Axis felt fear for the first time in his long military career. The Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, but none had ever displayed power like this. "All ships," he ordered quietly, "stand down weapons. Prepare to retreat." As the Imperial fleet began its humiliating withdrawal, Captain Markov of the Retribution transmitted one final message. "We told you to run. Last chance." Emperor Vex stared at the strategic display with disbelief. Red markers showed Imperial territories now under human control. In just 3 months since General Axis' failed bombardment, humans had pushed deep into the heart of the Empire. "How is this possible?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the throne room. They were confined to one planet. High Admiral Krell, who had replaced the disgraced Tauren, stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty, the humans have deployed technology we've never seen before. They can travel faster than our fastest ships and appear inside our defensive perimeters without warning." The Emperor slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. "Our empire has stood for 1,000 years. We conquered the Zeth Collective when they were at their peak. We defeated the Krell Dominion in a single day. How can one primitive species do this?" A hologram appeared, showing footage from the Imperial colony world Nexus Prime. Human ships hovered above the capital city, but they weren't attacking. Instead, they were distributing food and medical supplies to the population. "This is their most effective weapon, Your Majesty," explained Imperial Intelligence Director Voss. "They don't conquer our worlds through destruction. They offer our citizens better living conditions than we do." The Emperor watched in horror as the footage showed Imperial citizens welcoming human representatives. There were no signs of fear, only relief and even celebration. "Treason," the Emperor hissed. "Not exactly, Your Majesty," Director Voss continued. "The humans study each world they approach. They learn what resources the population needs, what hardships they face under Imperial rule. Then they offer alternatives. On another world, footage showed human engineers helping locals repair infrastructure the Empire had neglected for decades. Imperial propaganda centers were converted into education facilities. Food production increased threefold using human agricultural methods. 27 colonies have already declared independence from the Empire and formed alliances with the humans," Admiral Krell reported. "We've lost nearly 30% of our territory without firing a shot." The Emperor rose from his throne, trembling with rage. "Send the home fleet, all of it. I want Earth destroyed, no matter the cost." A nervous silence filled the room. "Your Majesty," Admiral Krell said carefully, "the home fleet commanders refuse." "What?" "After seeing what happened to General Axis' fleet, they believe attacking Earth would be suicide. And there's more." Krell hesitated. "We've received reports that human representatives have made contact with the fleet commanders directly. They've offered them and their crews asylum." The Emperor sank back onto his throne. "This can't be happening." Director Voss approached with a secure communication device. "Your Majesty, we've received a direct transmission from the human leadership. They wish to speak with you." After a moment of hesitation, the Emperor nodded. The hologram displayed a human in a simple uniform, not Commander Thomas, but someone new. "Emperor Vex," the human began. I am Admiral Blake of the Human Federation. I'm contacting you to discuss terms. Terms. The Emperor spat. The Empire does not negotiate with. With respect, Emperor, Blake interrupted. You no longer dictate the terms of this conflict. Your options are limited, but they do exist. The human displayed a map showing human forces positioned throughout Imperial space. We could continue our advance and dismantle your empire completely, Blake continued. But we prefer a more peaceful resolution. We propose a new galactic arrangement, one where the empire exists as one nation among equals, not as a conquering force. The Emperor stared at the human with hatred. Why should I agree to anything you propose? Admiral Blake's expression remained neutral. Because unlike you, we don't destroy what we don't need to. We're offering your people something they've never had under Imperial rule. Choice. Around the throne room, Imperial officials exchanged glances. What the human said was true. The Empire had always ruled through fear and force. You have 3 days to consider our proposal, Admiral Blake concluded. If you refuse, we won't attack your homeworld. Instead, we'll simply offer your citizens a better alternative. Based on our experience so far, we know what they'll choose. As the transmission ended, Emperor Vex looked around at his advisors. For the first time in Imperial history, they faced an enemy they couldn't defeat through superior firepower or intimidation. Your Majesty, Director Voss said quietly, I believe we should consider their offer. The Empire as we know it is already changing. Perhaps we can guide that change rather than resist it. The Emperor turned back to the strategic display, watching as another Imperial world turned from green to red. Prepare my ship, he ordered. I will meet these humans myself. The Grand Meeting Hall on the neutral space station, Unity, had been specially prepared for this historic occasion. Representatives from 37 formerly Imperial worlds sat alongside human diplomats. At the center table, Admiral Torrin sat across from General Wilson of the Human Federation, watching as aides finalized the documents before them. 5 years had passed since the first Imperial fleet approached Earth. 5 years that had changed the galaxy forever. The final provisions are acceptable, Emperor Vex's representative announced. The Emperor himself had refused to attend, sending Torrin in his place, a final insult to the Admiral who had led the first failed invasion. General Wilson nodded. Then we are ready to sign. As Torrin pressed his palm to the document scanner, officially ending the war, he couldn't help but speak. You could have told us what you were capable of, he said bitterly. You could have shown us your true power from the beginning. Wilson smiled slightly. We did warn you. But your empire has conquered 100 species through shock and awe. We knew you wouldn't believe us until you experienced it. The treaty formalized what had already happened across the galaxy. The transformation of the empire into a commonwealth of worlds, where each planet governed itself locally while participating in a galactic council. The Imperial homeworld retained significant influence, but no longer controlled the military might that had kept other worlds in submission. After the ceremony, Torrin walked the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Lieutenant Mira, now a commander in the new Commonwealth fleet, joined him. It's still difficult to understand, Torrin admitted. How did they advance so quickly? They didn't, Mira replied. That's what we misunderstood from the beginning. She activated a datapad, showing historical records the human authorities had recently shared. Humans have been preparing for alien contact for over a century. Their fiction, their entertainment, it all speculated about meeting advanced civilizations. Unlike other species, they imagined being the weaker side and planned accordingly. The records showed human defense initiatives dating back generations. Underground facilities built to survive orbital bombardment. Research programs dedicated to theoretical alien technologies. While other species developed technology naturally, humans specifically developed countermeasures against the exact kind of invasion we launched. Mira explained. They weren't more advanced. They were simply prepared for us. In his office aboard the Human Federation flagship Hope, General Wilson reviewed the integration plans for former Imperial worlds. A century of Imperial rule had left many planets stripped of resources, their populations used as little more than labor forces. The agricultural support for Nexus Prime is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported his aide. Their food production will be self-sufficient within 6 months. Wilson nodded. And the education programs. 20 million children across former Imperial worlds have entered school for the first time. The knowledge-sharing network is operational on all major planets. Wilson looked at the galaxy map on his wall. The borders that had once defined Imperial territory were fading, replaced by trade routes and cultural exchanges. What had begun as a war had become something else entirely. "Sir," his aide asked, "do you think the Emperor will ever accept this new reality?" Wilson shrugged. "Probably not. But his people already have. On dozens of worlds, humans worked alongside former Imperial subjects, rebuilding what centuries of exploitation had damaged. Species that had been enemies under Imperial rule now collaborated, finding common ground in their shared experiences." Commander Thomas entered Wilson's office with the latest reports. "The Deep Space Exploration Initiative has 15 volunteer worlds already," Thomas announced. "They're eager to map the unknown regions beyond former Imperial space." Wilson smiled. "The Empire explored only to conquer. Now we explore to learn." As the two men studied the reports, Wilson reflected on how differently things might have gone. Humans hadn't wanted war. They had prepared for it, expecting the worst from their first alien contact. Instead, they had accidentally created something new, the first true interspecies alliance based on mutual respect rather than dominance. "You know," Wilson said, looking at the stars through his viewport, "we warned them to run. I'm glad they finally learned to walk with us instead."